Spokane County United Way recently announced that two community-based organizations, Communities in Schools and YFA Connections, will each receive a $30,000 grant to provide resources and services to youth at 5 of our schools. Welcome to School Talk. I'm Taryn Roloff, and joining us today are Teresa Wright of YFA Connections, Ben Stuckert of Communities in Schools, Tim Hinkle of Spokane County United Way, and Dr. Nancy Stoll, Superintendent of Spokane Public Schools.
Hi, Taryn.
Hi, and welcome to all of you.
Thanks.
Dr. Stoll, these grants will eventually impact our graduation rate, and why is that important to Spokane?
Well, in a community where 60% of our children qualify for the federal lunch program, that's our measure of poverty, we know that it's not just about what we do academically in school for our students. It's as much about what we do for them socially, emotionally, after school. It really is about wrapping around resources to support kids and their families so that they can be successful. And so this grant will be another great opportunity to connect with our kids and their families. We are so fortunate in Spokane, certainly to have United Way take on the mission of high school graduation. Communities in Schools, that's their effort too. You've really been interested in trying to work with us in the dropout rate. And then with YFA and that connection with our families and the mental health of our families and their needs and addressing those is really powerful. We're very, very thankful.
So Tim, let's start off with you and maybe
Sure.
tell us about how these grants came
Sure.
about.
It might be best, Taryn, a little background in terms of, over the years, frankly, I think most people, your audience, those of us here at the table, I think are pretty aware of the fact that United Way has had a historical focus, if you will, on helping to provide assistance and engagement programming opportunities for youth in the community overall. But we also recognize that we've got to be able to look at that kind of whole child and how you can work through that. And that we've recognized over the years that we need to provide that support from really pre-birth through high school. A couple of years ago, our board lifted up high school graduation rate as one of the goals that we recognized as being a place that we had a responsibility to play, frankly, because it isn't just the school's job, but it is the community's job to do everything possible. Really, I would call it an imperative of the community to help make that happen and recognize that we did have a role to play in that. Based a bit on that history. The last few years, too, we've been involved actively with the Spokane Public Schools, other districts in the community, government leaders, and businesses in the community to look at early learning as that first place where we can start, and recognize that that was a key role that we could play ultimately. But we also saw that you need to continue on in that process, and there was a great deal of energy that was evolving in this community. I know that the public schools were looking very closely at what was happening in this transition period in middle schools. Organizations like Priority Spokane had put a lot of effort into that opportunity, and we've provided some other assistance through that effort too. The point being is that can we look at that continuum ultimately and figure out ways to help make that happen? What we saw was, as we went out into the community, talked to the community, the research that had come out said that kids get behind, stay behind. What kinds of issues do they run into when they're in school and out of school? And how can you support their parents and the community that surrounds them really is kind of the key thing that we've been trying to look at overall. And in that process, we also went out and talked to and listened to the community and had them tell us what were their aspirations and goals for education and how could we help work with them to make that happen and how did they want to make those things happen. And all of those helped us inform what kinds of things did we want to do with this request for proposals that went out and got a lot of terrific applications and chose two. These two organizations really have looked at that whole child, and that's really was critical for us. But it also was focused in on that middle school investment, and we've been making investments in this early learning arena. Here's another opportunity for us to be involved in the community. And because of what these programs are doing in terms of involving that whole child and looking at what's happening to these kids in school, during school, after school with their parents, with the teachers and the administrators, so that we can all get into that space of understanding what's in their best interest, so that all of those issues that they run into. So because I think all of you, and certainly those of you actively involved in working with the kids, is that they really check out long before they drop out. And that's the thing that we really wanted to see what we could do to address and find out ways to work with organizations in the community. And both Ben and Teresa will be able to describe for you more clearly the kinds of unique opportunities I think that these two programs will present. We know that there's plenty of other times for that to occur, and with other organizations too.
All right, so Teresa, let's hear from you. You're working with 5 of our schools.
Yes.
Okay, tell us about your program.
We had some history a number of years ago working with Spokane Public Schools with Safe Schools, Healthy Students. We also operate the Crisis Residential Center, so we have a long-standing history working with middle school and high schoolers. And what we've learned in that process is the transition from elementary to middle school is very difficult. And families end up with uncertainty around parenting, the pressures that are applied to these kids as they transition from one system to another. It made sense to us that we would look at 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So we've addressed 3 elementary schools, Whitman, Arlington, and Longfellow, and Gary Middle School, as they all feed to Rogers High School. We have history working in those schools, which helps. We have a wonderful relationship with Spokane Public Schools, which is also a huge plus. And I believe that by offering counseling services, individual and family, as well as parent education classes and support groups to this transitioning group of children, we'll be able to stabilize them as they get through middle school. Because I'm really convinced that it is in those middle school years that kids really start making the decisions that will impact their not being able to complete high school.
That's right. And just at our last middle school advisory meeting, and Taryn was there with the community, one of the things we talked about, Teresa, was that transition. And the research says that more than any other time in a child's life, that transition from elementary to middle school can have the greatest impact on whether students ultimately drop out. If that's not successful, there's much greater chance that kids will drop out of school. So thank you.
We're excited.
Yeah, that's good.
Ben, let's hear about your
Must be
program.
Ben's turn.
Yeah, so we're just really excited to be partnering with United Way and Spokane Schools and continuing our program at Glover Middle School. And the program at Glover, what Communities in Schools does is put a coordinator full-time in the school, and so they're embedded in the school culture, and then their job is to really figure out what the unique needs of the school are, and then the unique needs of each child, because they differ, and then try to bring in outside community resources to meet those needs. And so, for example, we have a Friday food backpack program to help meet the basic needs of, and we have a traveling dental hygienist that meets the dental needs, because it's pretty, well, it's kind of intuitive that if a child's teeth hurt, he's not going to be learning in class. We also have partners like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts that bring in after school programs. We have partner with Goodwill and bring in Good Guides mentoring programs. And then we offer evidence-based research family program called Strengthening Families program. And so it's really taking care of those wraparound services that as the state continues to cut budgets, that those needs might not being met. And students spend 75% of their time outside of the classroom. And so if the community services aren't available for those students as well as academics, then their needs aren't going to be being met and they'll fall behind. And so it's really just individualizing service to individual students.
And I think one of the things we've talked about in the community is the importance of nonprofit organizations as they partner with school districts to be really clear about what is the focus. And this community has said educational attainment is a focus. And especially they want to direct those interests to the middle school. So now to see our community agencies following up with that and providing their resources, aligning with that goal, I think that says a lot for Spokane and the wonderful organizations that we have here. Because I think when we're that intentional about our work, we'll be successful. We will all be successful, and then the real winners will be the kids. So it's really a powerful way to do business, I think.
And Communities in Schools has some programs in some of our other schools as well. You can go ahead
Yeah,
and
we
say
have
that.
a Miss School, Miss Out program that operates out of Shaw, but works with 14 different schools in that neighborhood. And so that's an attendance program where I think we've given out I think it's over 22,000 prizes as attendance incentives, and it's actually going very well. The attendance is actually increasing at those schools. And that was from a grant from AT&T, but we'll be able to continue that with community support next year, which is excellent. We also have a site coordinator at Chase Middle School, at Sheridan Elementary School, and at Lewis and Clark High School. And so we have a broad array of services in Spokane schools. And I think that one of the things that's unique about communities in school is we look at each student and we track them. We track those risk factors. And when we talk about dropout rates and kids getting behind, you can look at the signals that they're putting out, whether that's lack of attendance or behavior problems or academic performance. And so when we serve students with intensive services, and that's something that YFA did during the Safe Schools Healthy Student Grant, that's evidence-based, where you can actually look at those students and see if you're improving on them. And so I think that's really important as community-based organizations move forward, to look at, are you making an impact? Not just are you providing services, but are those services that you're providing an impact, and do you have outcomes as well?
Well, and I would imagine, Tim, when you look at granting money, you're interested in those outcomes.
Right, and I think that's, if there's been a change, I'll call it, in the social service environment, I think the same thing is true certainly in schools, is that it isn't about how many people go through the doors, but what kinds of long-term effects can you create and be able to demonstrate that. And that's, again, part of what this process has been, is to make sure that that has been identified at the front end, and then work with these organizations and the others that we support to help to demonstrate that. Because the community, frankly, is looking for that. They just don't want to say, go off and do good things, but show us how that investment of time and money is in fact making a difference. And I think the other thing that becomes really important in all of this is that there is, I think, as you've identified, Nancy, that opportunity that exists in the community right now, because so many have said, let's do something. And let's do something about this, and changing this is to use that energy and find ways to engage people either through programs like this or in other ways through the schools, to help work towards creating that positive change, increase the attendance for these kids, and then ultimately improve their grades, and have them be supported in a variety of ways outside of the classroom too, so that they can stay on track. It's an important part of what the fabric and future of this community is, but it's obviously talked about across the country too.
Well, and we're going to do our best in the public school system to make sure we capitalize on the kind of support we're getting. The graduation rate, as you know, is going up. The dropout rate, thank goodness, is coming down. In the last few years, it's dropped from 38% to 19%. And we've still got work to do, but it is really a wonderful feeling to know that we're all working and supporting each other. I'm sure there are other communities like us, but I don't think there's any community that does it as well as we do.
That's right.
When it comes to doing this kind of collaborative work in support of our kids. It's pretty amazing, I think.
We just have a minute or so left, but Teresa, if there's anything else you'd like to add, sounds like you've been involved with the district for quite a long time.
Yes.
Well, I think what makes this work is the partnership and the ability to establish relationships that go beyond categorical funding or regulations, and really pushing that aside and figuring out how do we all work together in a way that meets the needs of these youth and families without getting caught up in having them have hurdles to jump. And that's really our focus, is how can we do this in a way that makes it easy for families and benefits the whole system.
All right. Tim, let you have the last word here.
Wow, I just say that we're excited about the partnership, frankly, with the schools, but more importantly with the others in the community, and tickled to death that these two programs, I think, will be able to demonstrate how collectively the community can work together and change outcomes for kids and their families.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here today.
Yes, thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of School Talk.